Hi, everyone. Welcome back to this week's episode of the PETHS Alumni Network podcast. You join us for a very special episode. Not only is it our first staff member from PET joining the podcast, but it's a coach and a leader who has greatly shaped my perspective on leadership. You'll hear from Mr. Alex McCombes a little bit later about being a good teammate and having resilience through all the adventures of life. Before we get started, I just want to draw your attention to what's on screen. April is Be a Donor Month in Ontario. Now, furthermore, when you're watching this video on April 20th, it's the start of National Organ and Tissue Donation Awareness Week in Canada. So here you can see April 20th to 26th, 2025. And I encourage you to do your research, figure out how you can get involved in this great cause. As you can see on screen, 8 lives can be saved by one donor, and 75 patients can receive tissue from one donor. And it only takes a few minutes to sign up, but I encourage you again to do your research and find ways to support this great cause. Without any further ado, let's jump right into the video. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to this week's episode of the PETHS Alumni Network podcast. I'm your host, Nathan, and today we are joined by none other than Mr. Alex McCombes. How are you doing?
I am fantastic. How are you doing, Nate?
I'm good. Thank you so much for taking the time to be on the podcast this lovely morning. So to give a bit of background on you, you're a teacher at PET from 2005 to 2008. You're a coach, bodybuilder, actor, writer, fishing fanatic, all those things, a leader for sure, which we'll touch on as this episode goes on. But I guess, yeah, like we were talking a little bit offline, you always wanted to be a teacher, right? You've given back in many different ways. We met when you were coaching us during our OFSA run in 2019. So you've always been about giving back. And I guess that's kind of what led you into teaching, right? What kind of motivates you, to give back, all the time?
I just think it's part of being human to if you can offer to somebody, then why wouldn't you? I mean, I came into teaching in 1995, which is some time ago now, and I'm since retired. But I just felt like I liked being around people, and being able to offer back is all about people. So.
Yeah, so in terms of, that giving back, and I mentioned you were at PET from 2005 to 2008, back when the school was quite young, right? Do you have any, standout moments for you during your time at PET?
Oh my gosh, yes. Well, just to backtrack a tiny bit, I did teach elementary school for 10 years prior to coming to PET. And I had the pleasure of, during my career, teaching every single grade from kindergarten to grade 12. And then when I got to Trudeau, that's a unique little place that I adored, and my 3 years there were fantastic. Things that stand out, oh my gosh, how much time do we have? I think probably the connections that I made with people. I had some very, very close friends in my department, a few of which you know dearly also. And then kind of my coaching was a big part of what I did at Trudeau. Also, I was involved for a little bit of time in ultimate, but most of my time in volleyball, through boys and girls and co-ed. I coached volleyball essentially all year long.
Yeah, we've had a few of your students and coaches on the podcast, and of course they shouted you out, right? I guess kind of in terms of leadership, right? What's like the biggest difference between when you're teaching, primary grade kids versus, high schoolers? Like, how do you be adaptable in how you teach?
I think that you have to be adaptable not only with like age groups, but also with the particular people that you have in your class. So I didn't ever find any class was the same. You have to kind of figure out in the first little while what the needs are of the kids that you're teaching, and then cater to those things. If I were to give a general answer, I'd say that probably in the elementary, the younger years, like, I mean, I taught kindergarten phys ed, grade 1 phys ed. That's a very nurturing sort of environment, where, not that I didn't do anything different in high school, but engagement is very, very important. Helping people have fun. And kind of one of my philosophies was always helping people find their smile. And I wanted, as best I could, to have people leave my class at the end of the day having a smile on their face.
Right. I think, yeah, that's something that, I experienced when you were coaching us in 2019, making it fun, upbeat, energetic.
Mhm.
And on that kind of note, right, you coached volleyball for a long time. Like you mentioned, you coached, girls, boys, co-ed. Um, volleyball is a very dynamic and team-based sport, right?
Mhm.
What first, drew you towards volleyball?
That's a really good question because growing up, I played competitive soccer and I played competitive hockey, and and then kind of when I got into my first year of teaching was at a school called Coaldale Public School in Unionville. They needed someone to coach the co-ed junior team, so myself and another person took that on. And then when I went to Pleasantville, the second school that I went to, it was the same sort of situation. They needed somebody, and then it's like I'll use a fishing analogy. It's like this sport set the hook in it's me. I just wanted to be a part of it because I enjoy um, the teamness of volleyball. There's just
Mhm.
so many important things that everybody on the team needs to buy into for your team to be successful. And just to go back to the other question, my teaching was one thing. My coaching was maybe a little bit different in terms of what your boundaries are. If you're coaching a competitive team, then it's obviously a little bit different than teaching a grade 9 phys ed class.
Right.
So you're able to help the kids find their next level as best you can and sort of build a team. I always said, even especially in my elementary school days, if we go to a tournament, which we did go to a lot, um, there's a lot of schools at this tournament, but there's only a very few amount of teams, and you'll know when you see a team. And I endeavored to try to build teams with the people that I was coaching.
Right. Yeah. Hockey I can speak to directly. It's a little bit different where, one guy can take the puck, end to end, score a few goals and ultimately carry the team on his back, right? But volleyball, it's a little bit different, right? Like you have 3 touches, different people have to touch the ball, people have to be on the same page, playing defense, blocking, things like that, right? Yeah, so it's definitely a bit more of a team sport for sure, right? And you spoke on your time at Pleasantville, right? And
Mm.
you've had the opportunity to work closely with an Olympian. Um,
Yeah, I have.
yes. What separates an Olympian from your average athlete?
Ah, you're referring to Sam Schachter. I
Mhm.
I coached Sam for 4 years in elementary school, and I can count on three fingers, people that had the drive that he had and the work ethic that he had. And, I coached a lot of people that had amazing work ethic, but he was driven in a different way. I coached him multiple sports, but we focused on volleyball. And as you know, the elementary volleyball season is really short. And I kind of did the same thing that I did at high school as I coached volleyball all year long. On Sam was also a high jumper, let's say, and we'd high jump 3 mornings a week. We'd have hitting practice 2 mornings a week, all the way until the end of June. So I think that some people are talented, and I've coached many talented players, but then it's kind of what you do with that talent and how hard you're willing to work. And he's had a you know 15-year career on the world tour kind of thing. So he just had a level. He knew what he wanted to do.
Mhm.
I can tell you a little story if you want to keep it in
Yeah.
or not. I remember
Mhm.
taking Sam. He was in grade 7, and there was so few volleyball clubs around at that time. There was the Roar Storm, there was Toronto West, there was hardly anything in Markham at all. And I remember taking Sam to a volleyball OVA event because one of the kids on my team who was in 8th grade was playing. And I'll never forget this as long as I live, that Sam and I walked into the gym together on a Saturday morning, and he kind of looked around, and because you played club volleyball, you walk in and it's very different. You have 3 or 4 courts happening. You have the energy that fills that gym with all of the teams that are there, all the people that are watching, the coaches, the refs. It's just energized. And he didn't look at me. He looked straight ahead and said, "This is what I want to do." And he said it very quietly, and it was kind of like, and then he kind of gave me a look, and he looked back on the floor, scanned, and he said, "This is what I'm going to do."
Mhm.
And sure enough, I mean, he did go on to play university. He retired from court after 2 years of university, but he was like OVA player or rookie of the year and that sort of thing. But it was, he just knew. Yeah, he just
Right.
knew.
Yeah, so he played at the Olympics last summer in Paris, right? And
Yeah.
you spoke a lot about his work ethic that really got him there, and his vision, right, to turn his dream into a reality.
Mm.
Are there any other like skills that, as a teacher, as a coach, as a leader, that you really like try to implement into, you know, the students and athletes that you lead?
I think the notion of just never quitting, like being able to recognize that very few things in life go perfectly. And if you think about volleyball or you think about tennis or whatever sport, you think, well, you play a match, let's say it's a 3 out of 5 match, you go to 5 sets. Um, what's the point ratio, you know, like, because you're losing almost half the points a lot of the time. So I think just being able to, okay, that one happened, let's move on to the next one, and reframing your mind so that you're engaged in the moment, the actual present moment, so that you can continue to live in that moment and move on to the next one.
Right, like in volleyball, like sometimes like 27-25, right? That's almost like
Yeah,
a 50-50 ratio. You just have to
yeah,
win
yeah.
two more, right?
That's it.
And yeah, I like how you drew that kind of parallel to, you know, real life, right? You're gonna have ups and downs. You know, sometimes you might feel like you're losing 25-0, right? But it's about, you know, getting those points, getting on to the next one, right?
Yeah.
And you know, there are a few like kind of slogans, sayings that, you know, have stuck with me from when you coached me, right? The first one would be, you know, life's an adventure, right?
It is.
Rather than a journey, you say life's an
Yeah.
adventure, right? Can you kind of like explain, you know, what that means to you and like where that really came from?
Okay.
Yeah.
Uh, you know, you hear that, you know, my journey is this. That just never resonated with me. I preferred to reframe how I was thinking at really difficult times in my life, um, that it's an adventure, that it's something we get to do, and that's live however it is you're living. And as you know, probably get into this a little bit, as you know, and probably some of your audience knows, I got quite sick a number of years ago. That where I spent 3.5 years needing, you know, supplemental oxygen and kind of really in the grind of just trying to exist. So I really had to work on how I looked at things. And I wanted to see the little things that were good every single day, because we can all count bad things. But I preferred to focus on, well, that's really nice. That's really good. So obviously, after 3.5 years, I did get a double lung transplant. And here we are today.
Right. I think that journey, it kind of makes it sound, you know, difficult, not a lot to really look forward to except the end. But in an adventure, you look forward to every step of the way, whether it's good or
Mm,
bad. It's kind of like watching a movie, right? A lot of times when you're watching a
100%.
movie, things don't go the right way, and there's shocks and surprises along the way. But you kind of learn to deal with them, right? And another big thing that I've taken away from your time coaching me is like the idea of like pumping someone else's tires, right?
Yes.
That was a big
Yeah.
theme on our team, and
Yeah.
something that you really instilled in our team. Like, what does that mean to you? And like, again, where did that come from?
It comes from being part of a team. Like you made the reference to, you know, there's some sports where a really skilled player can dominate a little bit more than maybe they can in volleyball. I recognize that, you know, set choicing and who you're giving the ball to and all that kind of stuff happens. But ultimately, you need to get the ball to the setter to be able to get the ball to your attacker, whoever that might be. And if somebody's getting more reps than others, it's still part of the process. Um, I just think that persevering and working hard are terribly important things.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, but I think also you know, having the right people around you too, right?
Yeah,
And kind of being able to bring up those other people, right? It's important to have perseverance on your own, but I think, you know, we're a lot stronger with the people around us, right? And
yeah,
that's, you know, part of why I started this page, and also, the charity, tournament that I had last year,
Sure.
in support of Cystic Fibrosis Canada. That was, big, and yeah, it was great to have you out there.
I've done some, I've been an advocate for a while for CF Canada. I'm now currently, I've done a couple things with Trillium Gift of Life Foundation or network. And that's the network that, is part of the transplant process. And I actually just did a media spot for them. It'll be found on their webpage, Trillium Gift of Life network, and also beadonor.ca,
Right.
where it's just kind of offering to people that they can register to become an organ donor, and save someone's life like mine was saved. So just back to your other point, pumping tires, I'm trying to do that because if you can within yourself try to be your best, that's great. But if you can also help others try to be their best, and specifically on a volleyball court or otherwise, then I think that's very powerful. It's infectious to offer energy to other people when you recognize they might not be doing all that well in a situation, life circumstances, sport, whatever it is. It's kind of like I've always talked about the 3 smiles. I've told you about the 3 smiles.
Yeah.
And basically one of my missions from 25 years ago was try to make 3 people smile every single day. And I'm not talking about a little chuckle but a really genuine eye twinkling smile. And it's maybe a little bit selfish if you look at it one way, but it's still invaluable. Those smiles that you get out of people will inherently make you feel good. So if I can offer to somebody, whether in passing or very genuine moment, make them feel good, pump their tires, then I'm all about that.
And you talked about, giving back, right? And helping others, inspiring others, things like that. Last time we spoke, you had a book in the works.
Yes.
Is that still on its way?
Yeah, so it absolutely is. The only problem with it right now, it is far too long, because I've written a lot. During my really sick times when I couldn't do a lot, I started it. And then kind of post-transplant, I had a lot of difficulty with memory for the first almost year and a half. My short-term memory was very, very impaired. And then even some of the long-term stuff was impaired. So that was like a little tool or therapy that I used to recall things because I wanted to remember the transplant process. But I also then started remembering things from my childhood that I wanted to include that perhaps contributed to the person that I am today. So to answer your question, it's probably in its fourth or fifth draft. But at this point, I'm basically gonna have to get a couple beta readers and really pare it down to what the arc of the story is.
Right.
And I always said it's not just about my health, but guess what? There's a lot of my health in there, and that adventure that I've lived. And there's also a component of, I've been with my wife since I was 16 years old. So there's a big component of love in there. But I think the overwhelming thing is the adventure of my life.
Yeah, super.
In my eyes.
Yeah, I'm going to be super interested to read it, when it comes out, for sure. I'll have to get a signed copy from you. Speaking of that adventure and your health, right? One of the things you pursued earlier on was bodybuilding, right?
I did.
How did you get into that in the first place?
I had a good friend. I worked out I started working out kind of at the tail end of high school, but not seriously. I worked out. I was so active in sport all the time. And then when I got to university, I got really sick. I had a ruptured appendix and I lost all kinds of weight. And then I decided, oh, I want to put some of this weight back on in a really healthy way. And because I was so depleted, my body just absorbed everything and I made gains quickly. And then I kind of carried on in this new lifestyle because I really wanted, I understood what my diagnosis and my prognosis was at that point, clearly. And I wanted to um, give myself the best chance at beating some very scary odds. So I kind of adopted a very healthy lifestyle in terms of how I ate, how I slept, what I put in my body, and then of course exercise. Exercise was a massive component. The bodybuilding, I just had a friend come up to me one day who was invested in the bodybuilding world and said, you should really do a show. He said, you're basically already there. You just need to do X, Y, and Z in terms of your nutrition, and then you're ready to go. So I did it as an exploratory thing to learn more about myself, what my caloric needs were, my exercise thresholds, all of those sorts of things. And it intrigued me. I only ever ended up doing 3 competitions, but the takeaway was remarkable because I really understood what my body required and how I could keep it as healthy as possible moving forward. Because ultimately, I knew what was on the horizon for me. I just didn't know how far away it was. I always knew that I'd, get sick at some point, sicker than I was, and then I would have to probably stop working, and then at some point, ultimately make the decision whether I wanted to endeavor to be transplanted or not. And the answer was always yes. So you need to be kind of healthy, as healthy as possible when transplant comes around so that you can get through that process.
It sounds like throughout this episode, we've kind of been talking about, competition has kind of helped you learn more about yourself, but also, keep you healthy and grounded throughout, all aspects of your life, whether it's hockey, soccer, volleyball, bodybuilding, things like that. And another venture that you briefly mentioned to me before is your acting, right?
Yes.
You wanted to get into that. Can you kind of tell us a little bit about, where that started and where it's taken you?
It's kind of always in the back of my mind as an interest, but as a kid, I was so involved in sports, and I lived in a single parent household. My father passed away when I was 10, and so my mom was kind of split between 3 kids and getting them to do what they wanted to do. So I never really pursued it then, though I was interested. And then I found myself transitioning from Trudeau to Borough Secondary School right down the street, and my wife was doing a master's at the time, and we were kind of moving house, and we had kind of extra time. And I said, okay, I'm not going to be the guy who says coulda, shoulda, woulda. I'm going to be the guy that says I tried. And I did. I worked with a coach for a while. I had a few interviews with agencies and landed on the agent that I had at the time. And she was willing to work with me knowing that I was a full-time teacher. So we kind of started in the June of one year, my second year at Burr Oak, I think. And I booked a couple gigs like almost right off the hop. So I loved it. It was fantastic. But at that point, I also knew things were winding down in terms of my health. So I was able to be a part of that world kind of on and off for 3 years. And I had such a great time doing that. And my agent, Stephanie is her name, was fabulous to me, knowing that some, callbacks or auditions or even book jobs I wouldn't be able to do. She was still willing to work with me. So I had a lot of fun, and then, you know, things happened as they did in 2014, and I had to kind of go on leave from not only school, but I was put on hold with my agency. I had to say, look, I'm not well.
Mhm.
And I never kind of lifted that hold after that. Though I have been in touch with my agent more recently, and she's been amazing.
So we've talked a lot about competition and learning about how a team works and being competitive, having that work ethic. But is there kind of something different that you've taken away from your time acting?
Um, I think part of I'm an emotional person. I'll say that right off the hop. Anyone who knows me well understands that. Um, I think that I liked exploring emotions, and I just liked the whole process of preparation, um, discovering who it is that you're trying to embody and have that character be part of you and offer parts of yourself to that character. I really enjoyed things that maybe I hadn't done in my life in the acting world, though I wasn't in it very long. Um, I just really enjoyed the process of preparing for whatever it was.
Do you have a
I really liked auditioning too.
Yeah.
which is weird to say. And my best auditions were always improv auditions. I was, that rote kind of rehearsal of things wasn't necessarily my thing. So any improv for smaller roles that you would do, I really enjoyed that because I could just go in and it's off the cuff, and okay, this is what it is, this is what we're gonna do, and you just play around. It's a
Yeah.
lot of fun.
Yeah. Okay. You already answered my next question was going to be, do you have a genre, right? And yeah, definitely, I could definitely see, the improv, being charismatic, being witty, smart on your feet, things like that, right? So we've talked a lot about your different roles, right? You've been teaching, acting, writing, advocating, things like that, right? Is there anything that you'd like to get more into, in the future, like aspirations, anything like that?
I've been thinking a lot about that lately because my health is what I would refer to as stable right now, though there's a lot of fine details always because I still have cystic fibrosis and I've had a double lung transplant and I have other health concerns at this point. So I always kind of proceed with cautious optimism. Um, I think that my wife will retire very soon, likely in June. And for the first part of that, we may try to RV around Canada. We're not sure yet. But in terms of getting back into a working situation, I'm not really sure.
Hmm.
I have been in contact with my former agent, and she has been more than welcoming to me. So that's maybe something that I'll look at next year.
And I guess we'll, start to wrap up there. So one of the, memories that, I have was, that season during 2019,
Yeah.
we won the YRA finals, we went to OFSA. Are there any standout moments from that season for you?
Yes, there absolutely is. So, I was only a year post-transplant at that point. So even my short-term memory was still challenged when I was with you guys. And I will never forget the having been away from the volleyball world for a while, walking into the first practice that I was going to help with, and just I referred to it earlier, the energy of the gym. Like, you hear volleyballs hitting the floor, you hear guys, chuckling and getting prepared for practice as you do, lacing up your shoes, playing around a little bit, make sure the net's up, all those sorts of things. And then kind of when I started to run the warm up, I just felt this like profound um satisfaction. Just it was monumental in the way that all of the things that in my mind that nobody really knew about in the gym, I'd been through in the previous few years, and then here we are again, able to do this. Like I can do this again.
Mhm.
I've had a few of those really interesting moments in the recent past um, that strike me, and it helps me appreciate right now. It helps me appreciate, what I'm going to do after this. Being present as best I can, and I'm on 6.5 years of extra life. So
Yeah, we definitely, took a lot from you as our coach that season. It was a long season, and
yeah,
I think you definitely, contributed to that team culture and our ability to perform on the biggest stage, I guess. And we had a lot of, personalities on the team for sure. A lot of skill as well, but yeah, a lot
yes.
of great guys to be with. And I guess my final question for you would be, if you could nominate, any other teachers, students that you might have to be on the podcast, who would they be?
Well, I've already nominated a couple, and you've had them on.
Hmm.
Um, have you done Lisa yet?
No. Yeah.
I think Miss Shin would be
Yeah.
fantastic.
Uh-huh.
That would be, or Miss K would be
Yeah.
fantastic. In terms of former students, my first recommendation that I thought of was Eva, and
Mhm.
and you interviewed Eva.
Mhm.
She is wonderful. There's relationships that I have from Trudeau that I know will last
Mhm.
forever, and you've talked to a few of them already,
Mhm.
which is great because I was only there for 3 years.
Right.
So Yeah, I'll think about that and maybe offer a couple more
Yeah.
names.
No, they've been bang on so
Yeah,
far. Yeah, great, nominations that I've been fortunate enough to speak to. I guess, sorry, one final question. We've
sure.
talked a lot about resilience and, embracing the adventure rather than the journey and, pumping other people's tires. But is there any like words of wisdom, piece of advice that you could offer us before we close?
Sure. Um, when I was a little kid, I played competitive soccer, and for a while before he passed, my dad was my coach. And I remember I played for Aurora because I grew up in Aurora, and I remember, cleaning up the pitch after a match, and corner flags collected, all that sort of thing, and my dad just kind of standing in the middle of the pitch, and I'm like, are we going home? I'm 8 years old or whatever it was. He said, no, we have to speak together. I need to talk to you. And I'll I'll save you my dad's Scottish accent, but it was very thick. Um, and he said his message essentially was, you know, why aren't you trying? And I felt like, oh, I did try. And his words to me were, you've got to mean it, son. And he repeated that 2 more times. You've got to mean it, son. And he explained what he meant, but as an 8-year-old kid, I didn't fully understand what meaning it really is. And I understand it very clearly now, because in my adult life, there's times when I've really, really had to give everything that I had, whether it was just getting out of bed at 4 o'clock in the morning to go to the gym, to exercise, to be able to teach and to be able to coach, and then to be able to do it all the next day. That requires a level of effort. And if you want to do all of those things really well, then you've got to mean it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's great advice that you definitely instilled in us, during our season, and it's clear to see, where that's kind of helped you in your journey as well, or adventure, I should say. And I think it's something we can take away with like all aspects of our life, right? Especially like you said, when we're dealing with setbacks in life, whatever it might be, a 25-25 game,
Yeah.
you've got to put in your 110%. But not only, in terms of effort, but, like being able to lift your teammates up too, right? Put 110% effort into lifting your teammates up as well,
Yeah.
is something that's super important as a leader and as a teammate, right? So thank you very much for your time this morning, speaking to us about all these setbacks and pumping other people's tires, being competitive, finding different roles that you really are passionate about. It's great to speak to you. Thanks everyone so much for watching, and we'll see everyone next week. Peace out.
Thank you, Nate. Appreciate you.
Thanks.